Bright blue energy pools in the young man's palms, a sure sign that something devastating is about to follow. A thunderous cry tears from Soo-hyuk's chest, and all that stored-up power erupts outward, lighting up everything in sight. A mocking laugh escapes the demon Ser the moment he spots our guy pulling out every cheap trick in the book. Thrusting his weapon forward, Saray adds that these sad little stunts will only buy the young man a few extra seconds before the inevitable. The demon, massive black scythe in hand, rockets forward with every intention of ending this in one swing. He states with absolute certainty that the outcome of this savage clash was sealed long ago. For just a moment, Soo-hyuk shuts his eyes and centers himself. Accepting that he simply cannot match his enemy's speed, he pivots to an entirely different game plan. He opts for a new approach. Absorb the incoming strike and answer with a devastating counter. Snapping his eye open, Soo-hyuk activates the second act of the art of the military emperor. Intense blue energy begins spiraling around his open palms, coiled and ready to fire. Our guy announces the launch of an absorption technique called the absorption node, a move capable of flipping this entire fight on its head. The concentrated sphere of blue energy between his hands starts expanding and spinning faster and faster, then surges outward. With a biting sneer, the demon questions whether this is brave desperation or just plain stupidity. Flashing a wicked grin, the enemy unleashes a ferocious attack on the fighter. Even Seer looks surprised that the young man chose to meet the blow head-on. Seer gleefully accepts those terms and brings everything he has crashing down with renewed force. In response, Soo-hyuk instantly throws up a brilliant blue hexagonal barrier. The lethal red beam of dark energy fizzles out, dissolving harmlessly against his shield. Zalua watches the fight beside Nefalano and lets out a choked, tension-soaked gasp of horror. The demon concedes, almost approvingly, that it was not half bad. The shield actually managed to catch the tip of his scythe, but then he asks with dripping irony whether that is truly the best the man can do. Baring his teeth, Soo-hyuk makes it perfectly clear that this is nowhere near his limit. The protagonist mentally commands himself to endure this crushing onslaught, channeling every ounce of willpower he has. A heavy sigh escapes the man when he notices his protective barrier starting to crack under the relentless pressure. The system immediately flags that the dark, corrupting demonic energy is gradually seeping into the hero's body. Sweat beads across the young man's forehead from the mental strain, but he holds firm. The system, however, flashes an urgent warning. His mental corruption resistance is critically low. The hexagonal barrier finally starts to splinter apart, and our guy curses under his breath, feeling control slipping through his fingers. Soo-hyuk makes a pivotal choice. Forget the system skill and rely purely on his own inner strength. The demon is completely blindsided, sputtering in confusion, and demanding to know what on earth this guy is about to pull. A booming battle cry erupts from Soo-hyuk's chest as he unleashes every drop of hidden energy within him. He fights off the dark energy successfully, purging the corruption from his body, while the Divine Unity technique steadily smothers and absorbs the demonic aura. The scene shifts in an instant as smoke floods the area, swallowing everything from view. From high above, the massive battlefield stretches out beneath a blanket of smoke and devastation. Soo-hyuk stands directly across from Saray. A vast pool of black blood stains the wrecked ground, and right on cue, the demon's sinister laughter cuts through the silence. The demon runs his tongue along his long, blood-soaked fangs, looking entirely unbothered by the hit he just took. But the truth tells a different story. There is now a gaping hole clean through him. Even so, Sarah declares with a cocky smile that today is definitely his day. The demon's body begins knitting itself back together, and he admits with genuine surprise that this seemingly ordinary man just ripped away half of him. Sarah remarks with open astonishment that in his very long life, he has never encountered a lunatic quite like Soo-hyuk. Soo-hyuk, one eye now burning with an eerie violet glow, takes that as a compliment. Our hero decides it is time to put an end to this painfully drawn-out slugfest once and for all. He extends his right hand forward and begins funneling every scrap of dark power he can summon into his fist, announcing the second act of the third cut of the art of the military emperor. A violet aura shaped like a colossal tiger forms around his fist, and the deadly technique explodes outward with a deafening roar. The demon shrieks in terror, unable to process that the young man still has this much fight left in him. The enormous violent phantom tiger spreads its massive jaws wide, fully intent on swallowing the demon whole. Seer tries to push back, but he is already running on empty. The protagonist roars furiously at the stubborn demon, demanding that he just go down already. With raw fury, Soo-hyuk launches every bit of his gathered might straight at his opponent. And just like that, where the demon once stood, there is nothing left but a cloud of ash drifting in the air. The ash scatters instantly. A system window pops up confirming that the 70th rank Great Demon Ser has been utterly annihilated, awarding a massive chunk of experience. Nefalano stands frozen in shock, and Zalua cannot believe what he just witnessed. The young man took down the demon entirely on his own. A strangled groan pushes past Soo-hyuk's lips as he drops to his knees. Feeling the full weight of exhaustion, our guy mentally concedes that he burned through way too much of his own energy. Nefalano sprints to her wounded ally in a panic, shouting his name at the top of her lungs. Seeing the sorry shape he is in, the girl urges him to fall back, but the man shakes his head, making it plain that he is staying put. Steely resolve settles over the young man's face, and in a rock-solid voice, he declares that he will fight until the very last breath. He surveys the elves' battle and states flatly that he will not abandon his comrades or run from this fight. Nefalano turns to the protagonist again, alarmed, waiting for whatever order comes next. Then a chilling laugh echoes from somewhere in the distance. A massive red-eyed demon bares its fangs with eager anticipation, sizing up the humans like they are an easy snack. The creature sneers that the lesser demons have embarrassed themselves by actually letting the humans put up a fight. An elf's howl is swallowed by mocking laughter as claws tear him apart, and the monster dismisses the humans as pathetic fools. A gut-wrenching scream rings out as the demon's foot crushes one of the Sacred Land's defenders underfoot. The demon steps forward with a grumble of irritation, clearly annoyed that he had to show up here in person. A red system window flares to life, sounding the alarm. Third-rank Great Demon Beelzebub has entered the field. Soo-hyuk stares at the notification in pure horror, grasping exactly what kind of nightmare he is about to face. The demon's vicious laughter rolls across the battlefield as he credits Lucifer for the assist, and his companion chimes in, thrilled at the prospect of some entertainment. The system displays the stats for two higher demons simultaneously. Leviathan, sporting a maw on her face, and the horned Velfagor, ranked 4th and 5th respectively. Zalua blurts out in shock that he cannot believe his eyes. This many great demons appearing all at once is unheard of. Taking it all in, Soo-hyuk grasps the full weight of the situation and exhales heavily, realizing that a genuine, full-scale demonic invasion may have just kicked off. A hand touches his shoulder, and Soo-hyuk turns to meet Nefalano's worried gaze. He asks Peli to speed up the healing, because the real fight is only now getting started. The scene cuts away. Out on the battlefield, the elven warriors continue fighting tooth and nail against wave after wave of advancing monsters. The malicious demon points off into the distance, announcing to his army the true purpose behind this sudden onslaught. It becomes painfully clear that the primary target is the World Tree, the sacred heart of the elven realm. The enemy commander barks out the names of his two heaviest hitters, Leviathan and Velfagor, ordering the pair to carve a path forward. The two great demons exchange a look and reply in unison that they have been waiting for exactly this command. A beat later, we see the protagonist's fist clenched tight with grim purpose. Soo-hyuk fixes his stare straight ahead and states firmly that these demons must be stopped and destroyed, no matter the cost. Nefalano tries to hold him back, reminding him that he has not even recovered from his injuries yet, pleading with him to wait. But the ground shudders from a massive impact, and the protagonist has already vanished from the spot. Soo-hyuk apologizes to his companion and, without waiting for a reply, bolts toward the enemy. He explains that there is simply no time left because every wasted second could mean the World Tree's destruction. Winding up, the man channels every last reserve of strength into his fist for one crushing blow. A gigantic maw yawns open directly in his path, and within a heartbeat, the monster coils its body around the protagonist. Soo-hyuk exhales in frustration, realizing his punch sailed wide and missed its mark completely. The enemy demon, watching all of this unfold, tosses out a mocking comment about the fighter's botched attempt. The opponent sneers that only a pathetic creature would dare throw a tantrum in front of him, and its massive hand reappears. The gaping, fang-lined maw grins menacingly, and a voice from within declares that everything the young man does is nothing more than stalling his own death. Drawing a colossal sword from its maw, the red-eyed demon thunders that no one can alter the predetermined fate of destruction. Dropping to one knee after his failed charge, a shaken Soo-hyuk exhales raggedly, fully aware that the three great demons in front of him outclass him in every department. Yet even in this desperate spot, unbreakable resolve flashes in the young man's eyes, and he mentally identifies his true target in this battle: their overflowing arrogance. Velfagor chimes in impatiently, announcing that he cannot wait to jump into this scrap. When asked about teamwork, Leviathan tells the others to stay out of it for now, noting that their leader Baal apparently wants all the fun to himself. Agreeing to spectate, Velfagor grumbles that the boss is hogging all the action, and mutters about it being just another perk of higher rank. Cracking the stone surface of the ground, Beelzebub announces that he will personally teach the boy how foolish it is to stand in his way. The giant demon flashes his nightmarish fangs, promising to make the young man regret his choices even in the afterlife. The protagonist's face contorts with raw strain and dread as the monstrous force of the incoming attack hits him like a wall. The ground buckles under a blinding flash and a bone-rattling roar as the demonic sword hammers into the battlefield. Agonized screams and cries of horror fill the air, and scarlet light flares across the landscape as the shockwave from the blast sends warriors tumbling in every direction. Our guy stares at the blast zone in genuine awe, silently acknowledging that the demon's raw power is on another level entirely. Catching his breath for a split second, the young man processes that this attack was nothing more than a warm-up swing. Settling into a defensive stance, he thinks with a shudder about what a full power strike could do to this place. Sinister laughter fills the air, and the demon's enormous maw announces its intention to devour every living thing in sight. Narrowly dodging those massive teeth, the young man puts together that he is face to face with the demon of gluttony itself. Soo-hyuk narrows his eyes and locks in, understanding that this enemy wants to consume everything without leaving a trace. A harrowing cry for help echoes across the area as the demon snatches an elf up in its enormous, fang-lined jaws. Watching the gruesome scene, the young man flashes back to his own absorption node, the technique he used against Ser. He realizes he is now on the receiving end of that same helpless feeling. Slamming his foot down hard, stones and dust erupt into the air as the young man readies his counterattack. Deciding to give the demon exactly what it craves, Soo-hyuk rockets skyward and wraps himself in a blue aura, gearing up for the decisive blow. A blazing blue flame engulfs the young man's clenched fist, and he furiously declares that he is not leaving this battlefield without hitting back. His eyes ignite with piercing blue light, broadcasting his surging power. But surprise crosses his face when the demon stops him cold, right there in midair. The creature snorts with contempt, remarking that the young man's approach is far too predictable. In an instant, a blinding explosion lights up the area. That is how the demon swats our hero out of the sky. Soo-hyuk crashes back first into the rubble, a dull, choked groan forced out of him on impact. Lying on the ground and clutching his side, the young man pieces together that the demon read his every move and had a counter waiting. Wiping blood from his face, he questions whether being so direct is the right approach, and acknowledges just how terrifying the great demon's power truly is. Finally dragging himself upright, the young man accepts that this is going to be the most grueling fight of his life. The demon barks in irritation that the young man is acting like an annoying bug that simply refuses to die. Wrapped in a sickly green aura, the demon expresses surprise that the young man can still stand, then spews a stream of green sludge at him. Carving through the air with blue energy, the young man dashes forward and weaves past every glob. One sweep of green energy does manage to clip him though, and our hero is decidedly not happy about it. A system window confirms that his poison resistance is holding against Beelzebub's venom. The young man notes grimly that he has barely survived a single exchange so far. Staring up at the demon, the young man wonders what on earth he could possibly use to take down an enemy like this. Steel clashes ring out as the young man tries to smash through the barrier formed by the enemy's weapon. The massive horned demon shows off with a mocking display, effortlessly blending his enormous size with blinding speed. Our guy dodges and weaves, mentally cataloging how the entire area around him has been reduced to rubble, a testament to the enemy's catastrophic blast radius. Despite throwing everything he has into it, the young man realizes that simply closing the distance with this monster is a near impossible feat. At that moment, only one option remains, and the young man wastes no time. Cloaked in blue aura, he launches himself forward. Slipping around behind the demon, Soo-hyuk notices that the monster's vision is weakest from that angle. The demon's eye snaps wide in sudden surprise as it registers a threat from behind. The creature whips around in confusion, clearly baffled at how this guy got so close. The young man channels the fifth form martial art, and energy begins swirling around his hand. Soo-hyuk rockets into the air, and a radiant sword called Heavenly Severance materializes in his grip, then slices through the space before the hero in one clean arc. Soo-hyuk's eyes blaze with brilliant blue light as he lets out a mighty cry and drives his strike into the demon. A searing flash of light erupts across the surroundings, paired with a deafening cry and an explosion. A heartbeat later, Soo-hyuk's expression settles, and the intense blue glow in his eyes fades. A blade of pure blue energy whistles through the air and reaches its mark. But it does not cut through the demon. The enormous fang-studded Beelzebub admits he has gotten bored of just standing around watching. Out of nowhere, the monster's long, whip-like tail shoots straight toward the young man. From the corner of his eye, the young man catches sight of yet another opponent, and the shock hits him hard. He darts sharply to the side, narrowly avoiding the tail blade slicing through the air toward him. It is Leviathan, who flashes a smile and concedes that the young man is considerably faster than he appears. Soo-hyuk tumbles through the air, dodging another strike, and curses under his breath in frustration. Gripping the hilt of his sword, the young man scans the chaos around him and realizes the situation keeps spiraling downward. He understands that beating just one demon was already a monumental task. Now, two more have joined the party. Leviathan rounds on Beelzebub with open disdain, chiding him for the embarrassment of a great demon struggling against some insect. An irritated Beelzebub snaps at his ally to shut up and orders the others to stay out of it. He intends to finish this one personally. Watching the squabble unfold, our hero notes that teamwork is clearly not the demon's strong suit, and that could be his opening. In profile, a look of sharp focus crosses Soo-hyuk's face as he locks in on his next move. Standing right beside him is his dependable ally, the white-haired Nephalano, poised and ready for action. The young man clutches a blue blade in his hand, confident he can always count on her. The scene snaps back to the demons. Velphegor, fuming, unleashes a string of curses at his useless comrades. The demons start bickering among themselves at the absolute worst possible moment. Velphegor seethes that three great demons are somehow failing to put down a single human. The demons trade bewildered glances, dropping their guard for one critical second. The monsters look around in confusion, trying to figure out where their opponent went. The fat demon suggests the enemy might have simply turned tail and run, and asks the others if they agree. The horned one tells him he is an idiot. Meanwhile, our hero has already launched himself forward, making it abundantly clear that fleeing never even crossed his mind. Soo-hyuk orders Nephalano to hit from the left flank, splitting the enemy's attention. He takes the right flank himself, and Nephalano immediately agrees to the plan. The strategy is set, and their first target is Leviathan. The young man locks his gaze onto the serpent-bodied demon. Both allies charge forward in unison. The demon's massive form staggers, and genuine surprise registers on her face at the incoming assault. In an instant, a blue beam from the young man's sword slashes through the air, proof that the demon's rampant overconfidence has left them wide open. Soo-hyuk announces the next phase of his assault, bracing for a brand new stage of this brutal battle. He plunges straight into the demon's blood, determined to pick off the enemy forces one by one. The ambush lands successfully, though the aftermath of this bold push proves to be a mixed bag. Touching down on the ravaged ground, Soo-hyuk realizes the enemy will bounce back fast unless completely destroyed. Now it is Nephalano's turn, and she pours every ounce of her accumulated power into the attack, her eyes blazing with the effort. Soo-hyuk fires off a quick command, and she, catching every word, summons a massive energy dragon with gaping jaws, ready to devour its prey. The protagonist orders her to do whatever it takes to shut down the stubborn enemy's regeneration for good. A swift streak of blue energy cleaves the space around them as Nephilano strikes. A blood-curdling scream rips across the area the moment the demon begins to be erased from existence. Baring his teeth, Velphegor realizes with white-hot fury that he has walked straight into a well-laid trap. The enraged demon decides to handle these uppity pests himself. No backup needed. Soo-hyuk confirms that the demons are each fighting solo, and that hands him a clear strategic edge. The winged demon furiously charges up a sphere of energy, swearing to burn the enemy to cinders. A red beam of staggering power rips through the space, carving a trail of devastation in its wake. Dodging clear, the hero turns to his loyal ally and instructs her to keep both of the stronger demons occupied, giving them zero breathing room. The young man claims Velphegor as his own responsibility, and Nephilano confirms she is ready to execute the maneuver. The demon tries to roast the dodging young man alive, snarling that he is nothing but an annoying cockroach. A cruel smirk stays glued to the demon's face as he gives chase, probing the hero's limits. The demon declares with total confidence that the young man, tricks and all, remains entirely at his mercy. The enemy's edge comes from total dominance of the airspace, giving him freedom to attack from any angle. And so, Soo-hyuk draws his sword once more and decides that step 1 is clipping the demon's wings. Literally, genuine shock flickers in the demon's eyes the instant he sees the blue flash. The blue blade carves through the dark space, leaving a brilliant trail of light in its wake. The demon has no time to react to the maneuver, and the protagonist slices clean through the monster's wing. Dropping to the ground, Soo-hyuk invites his opponent to come down and settle this in a fair, grounded duel. Plummeting with a severed wing, the demon bitterly acknowledges his lapse in attention and is left reeling at the audacity of a man who just charged him blade first. The ground shudders under the force of Velphegor's monstrous crash landing, and chunks of rock and dust fly in every direction. Soo-hyuk has accomplished exactly what he set out to do. Landing in a fighting stance, our guy observes that the enemy will not be taking any flights anytime soon without those wings. Tightening his grip on the blade's hilt, Soo-hyuk vows to finish this dangerous, resilient opponent once and for all. The young man begins executing his signature technique, Heavenly Severance, gathering energy around himself. A sweeping arc of the blue blade cuts through the space, but the dust cloud is empty. Nobody home. The protagonist's eyes go wide with shock. The demon is already behind him and admits, almost grudgingly, that the man surprised him a little with that unexpected agility. Winding up his own strike, Velphegor assumes the young man is underestimating his power and ignites a massive ball of searing energy before hurling it forward. He decides to return the favor, and a gigantic red beam tears from the demon's hands, screaming straight at Soo-hyuk. Soo-hyuk cannot dodge. In an instant, half his body is vaporized by the impact. Blood pours from the wound, and the young man, in total shock, turns to stare at the point of impact. He realizes with dawning horror that his right arm has been completely obliterated by that devastating strike. Dripping with mockery and satisfaction, the demon proclaims victory over the young man who just lost his ability to fight. Velphegor adds with a snide remark that his aim was a tiny bit off. But at this point, it hardly matters. The blue blade sinks into the ground as Soo-hyuk struggles to stay on his feet. Blood seeps from the young man's mouth, and his remaining strength begins to drain away. He grasps that even his iron-forged body could not withstand it. A single enemy thrust punched right through him. The young man thinks bitterly about the exact moment his plan fell apart. He was practically certain his blow had connected and split the demon in two. He concludes that he played it too predictably, and that gave the enemy all the time in the world to set up a counterblow. Regret will not change anything now, but Soo-hyuk knows he needs to find another way through this. Gripping his blue sword's hilt, Soo-hyuk steels himself for a desperate charge, acutely aware that a new strategy is the only thing between him and total defeat. Velphegor asks with dripping sarcasm whether the young man seriously plans to keep fighting in such a pathetic condition. He is grudgingly forced to admit that the young man is showing jaw-dropping tenacity for a mere human. The demon's enormous paw slams into the ground. The demon notes dismissively that this does not mean he is impressed, and asks with a menacing edge whether the young man can still fight after he loses every single limb. The scene shifts to another location, closer to the tree. Nefelano lets out a heavy sigh, admitting to herself that she has absolutely no shot at winning. The girl wonders how Soo-hyuk could possibly hold his own against such a beast. Summoning her last reserves of strength, Nefelano squares up before the colossal enemy. Beelzebub licks his lips in anticipation, savoring the easy meal ahead, and taunts with a smirk, asking if this is really the best an ancient dragon can muster. He bellows at her to stop playing around and actually attack for real. Then he hammers the ground with a devastating blow, launching chunks of earth straight at the girl. The ground shakes from the falling debris, and brilliant flashes light up the surroundings. The flying rubble, however, poses no real problem for Nefelano. The actual threat to the girl lies somewhere else entirely. The key to bringing down this formidable enemy is locating his weak point. Nefelano bolts from her position, determined to find a gap in the monster's defenses. The one encouraging sign is the enemy's setback. Leviathan's defeated body lies in the dirt, and her recovery rate has dropped considerably, buying the allies precious time. Nefelano thinks hard about what Soo-hyuk would do if he were standing in her place. Meanwhile, the demons are lining up their attacks in her direction. In the next heartbeat, Nefelano pushes off the ground hard to dodge a crushing blow. The girl tells herself that if Soo-hyuk were here, he would absolutely find a solution, and she launches herself into the air. Up there, Nefelano spots that the rear section of the demon's body is far less armored. That is where the weak point hides. The demon smirks sarcastically, catching on that the girl is trying to outmaneuver him. Splitting open his massive maw, Beelzebub gets ready to rip the pesky challenger apart, declaring with smug confidence that her old tricks are no longer going to cut it. Nefelano begins concentrating a powerful energy charge between her hands. In a flash, the cluster of destructive energy reshapes into a massive energy shield. The demon's green poison slams into the shield walls and goes nowhere. Nefelano realizes that a single touch of that toxin would poison her instantly, and she understands the enemy is deliberately keeping her too far away to land a real attack. In an instant, Nefelano's scarlet eyes fly wide with horror and intense strain. The very next moment, a blinding red beam of energy rockets toward her. Nefelano barely manages to block the hit, but sacrifices her shield, which explodes into pieces. The girl is hurled back several meters and is forced to concede that the enemy is simply too powerful and dangerous for her. Badly battered, Nefelano fights to pull herself back up off the ground, but then her blood runs cold again. The enemy is already standing right in front of her. The demon is already airborne, with his massive sword raised, primed to finish off his weakened prey. A sinister roar tears from the demon as he brings down the strike and bellows that she should spend less time thinking during a fight. A colossal burst of scarlet energy detonates from the demon's blow, flinging stones in every direction. The collision of forces strikes a blinding flash of stark white and deep crimson light. Inside the red energy dome, Nefelano strains to hold back the demon's titanic sword, exhaling hard and knowing her strength is almost completely tapped out. From the gaping, tooth-studded maw of the ground-bound monster comes a sinister, booming laugh, and it tells its victim she should consider death at its hand a supreme honor. Nefelano's eyes flare with bright red light as she flat-out refuses to give up here and now. A fierce, burning determination not to let Soo-hyuk down fills the battered girl with fresh fighting strength. Drawing every last bit of herself together and channeling all her accumulated energy into the next charge, she braces. Deep within her body, the ancient true power of the dragon, dormant for ages, stirs unmistakably to life. The great demon Beelzebub, wearing a lopsided smirk, asks what kind of last-ditch resistance the girl is putting up. The concentrated red energy surrounding the girl erupts with renewed intensity, wrapping her in a dense cocoon. A flicker of confusion passes through one of the demon's red eyes when he catches sight of the transformation. Barely containing his rage, the monster roars curses at whatever power has dared to challenge him. A massive scarlet sphere of destructive energy gathers around Nefelano's body and detonates. Right out of the swirling red flames, a dragon's bared, fang-filled maw emerges. Grinning maliciously, Beelzebub identifies the awakening power of an ancient dragon and snidely remarks that in his long life, he has seen just about everything. Large scales crystallize across the face of Nephilano's dragon form, and she lets loose a thundering battle cry. The demon eagerly accepts her challenge, and, itching for a head-on collision, cracks open his own colossal maw, bristling with razor fangs, vowing to swallow her whole. A desperate, resolute cry tears from Nephilano's throat as she pours everything into the charge. Building up terrific speed, the girl hurls herself full throttle straight toward the monster's open maw and braces for a do-or-die counterattack. The monster's jagged fangs snap shut with a thunderous clack. The monster notes with absolute contempt and open mockery that the girl just dove headfirst into his jaws at a full sprint. Then, a shadow of deep confusion and alarm sweeps across the demon's face. In the next instant, a blinding flash ignites right inside the monster's maw. The demon screams and howls in fury, unable to comprehend what just happened. A brilliant beam of white light starts bursting out from within the monster's tooth-lined jaws. An enormous, glowing dragon literally punches through the demon's dense flesh from the inside out. The great demon's colossal body convulses violently in agony from the piercing devastation. A gut-wrenching scream of pain, shattering the silence of the battlefield, rips from the monster's throat, along with the dragon. The demon's flesh starts tearing apart from the inside at terrifying speed, and its body is consumed by blazing white light. The elves watching the spectacle stare in open-mouthed shock, unable to process that they are actually looking at a dragon. The remaining demon, Leviathan, realizes with mounting horror that it was this very dragon that just killed Beelzebub. The scene switches. Soo-hyuk, gasping for air, bitterly declares that all his efforts have been for nothing. Breathing hard and smearing blood from his face, the young man mentally acknowledges his limit. Dropping his gaze to the wrecked ground, Soo-hyuk scrapes together his last reserves of strength. The young man's hand, locked around the blade's hilt in a death grip, starts trembling against his will. With a vile cackle, the enemy asks whether his opponent is already completely finished. Velfagor spreads his leathery, membranous wings and announces that the real battle is only just getting underway. Springing forward, the demon picks up speed for a fresh assault, and, hovering over the battlefield with a sadistic grin, invites him to put up a better fight. Laughing freely, the enemy demands that the young man get his blood pumping for real. The demon's eyes and exposed fangs flash with an ominous blood-red glow. While the taunting demon hovers overhead, claiming that killing the young man will bring him genuine pleasure, Soo-hyuk, radiating blue light, darts and weaves through the incoming blows. The bitter realization shows plainly on the young man's face. The strategic initiative in this drawn-out war was lost long ago, and completely. Dropping to one knee after the opponent's razor-sharp thrust, the young man accepts that, at this rate, he can neither hold out nor land a hit. Iron determination is etched across the young man's face. His intense gaze is locked on finding any possible crack in the demon's defense. While Soo-hyuk methodically analyzes the battlefield, reading the enemy's arrogance and aggression, the demon spreads his broad, membranous wings and sends down a rain of sharp red energy spears. As scarlet spears crash against the blue protective sphere, our guy stubbornly holds the line and dodges attacks, steadily closing the gap to draw his opponent nearer. Fueled by sheer determination, the young man grips the blue sword with his black-gloved hand and channels every remaining drop of energy into the blade, preparing to deliver one decisive blow. Even through crippling exhaustion, a bright blue spark ignites in the young man's eyes. He understands that fate is handing him exactly one chance. With a thunderous battle cry, the young man swings the blue blade with everything he has, resolving to empty his last reserves into this single strike. A lethal blue arc, born from the sword's savage swing, carves the space from bottom to top, leaving a brilliant trail in its wake. The glowing blue blade connects with its target, leaving behind a surgically clean cut that splits the air itself. Having delivered his all-or-nothing strike, the young man sees only the demon's blurred black silhouette. The protagonist's expression snaps to shock the instant he realizes that his perfectly executed attack did almost nothing to the demon. Soo-hyuk is left completely lost. Even his meticulously planned strike failed to get the job done. With a contemptuous smirk, the demon declares himself disappointed by the young man's feeble hit. Spreading his wings across the sky, he readies his next attack while the young man sinks into despair. With theatrical concern in his voice, the demon consoles the young man, telling him not to take the loss too hard. With a venomous grin, the enemy states that this is the absolute ceiling of the young man's power, and the time has come to wrap things up. Condensing dark red energy in his palm, the demon complains wearily about being bored. Hoisting a colossal ball over his head, he bares his teeth and decides to end this. But right then, a massive white dragon clamps down on the demon, snapping its jaws shut in an instant and very nearly biting the demon clean in half. Soo-hyuk immediately jerks his gaze upward, clearly not expecting this twist. Warmth floods the young man's expression when he realizes that Nephalano has come to his rescue. Velphegor, however, manages to wrench himself free of the dragon's jaws with barely a scratch. He wheels around in disbelief. He was seconds away from finishing the protagonist, only to be interrupted. But there is no time to dwell on it. A fist is already a centimeter from his face. Nephalano is right there, hammering the demon with blow after blow, and he cries out, unable to figure out what Beelzebub and Leviathan are even doing right now. Nephalano cracks him square in the face again. The force of the punch literally drives the demon into the ground. Lying in the dirt after his abrupt arrival, the demon launches into a furious rant, outraged that a couple of nobodies have brought him this low. Pulling himself together and regenerating, the demon declares that playtime is over. But from his crater in the shattered ground, he wheezes that he will kill them all the moment he gets his strength back. Nobody, however, is willing to give him that luxury. Slicing through the sky, Soo-hyuk comes crashing down on the demon from above, vowing that he will not let him follow through on that plan. Completing his high-speed dive, the young man drives his glowing blue blade into the demon with the finishing blow. The blue blade buries itself in the demon, and he lets out a harrowing wail. His eyes bulge with disbelief as he sees the blade run him clean through. Gathering every remaining shred of energy, the young man announces the activation of the first palm of the art of the military emperor. Mentally, the young man thanks Peli. It was her work that completely shattered the demon's outer defenses. Funneling every last bit of energy into his right palm, the young man executes the final move, piercing palm. Our hero stands before the gigantic maw, his entire body sheathed in blazing blue light. The blue energy ball swells to enormous proportions, engulfing everything within its blast radius. A torrent of power rips the demonic maw apart from the inside, leaving nothing behind but a brilliant glowing beam. The next instant, everything scatters. The young man drops to his knees on the shattered ground, utterly spent. The system confirms the defeat of the great demon Velphegor, and then, after that brutal ordeal, the young man topples face first onto the grass, his internal reserves completely drained. Nephalano spots his collapse and bolts toward him, shouting his name at full volume. The girl catches her wounded ally, begging him to focus on recovering first. The young man refuses any rest point blank, when suddenly a voice screams that the World Tree is in grave danger. Both allies remain frozen in shock, surveying the devastation left by the savage fight with the higher demons. Elven warriors in green cloaks lock into a defensive ring, swords drawn and ready, using their last strength to hold the enemy at bay. But Leviathan's tail whips the elves aside like rag dolls, and one of them lets out an agonized scream. The blue-skinned demoness shrieks furiously, demanding they remember their primary objective. Leviathan bares her jagged teeth and announces the systematic, total destruction of the World Tree. Kneeling beside him, Nephalano tries to shake the protagonist back to his senses, and keeps insisting that continuing the fight in his condition is pure insanity. The young man's face twists with searing pain, and he accepts that, in this state, he could not take down even a low-level demon. Soo-hyuk arrives at the agonizing realization that even Nephalano's healing magic cannot bring back his severed arm. Green light gathers in the girl's palms as she attempts to apply a healing technique to the slumping young man. Through the haze of pain, a thought sparks in the young man's mind: the possibility of regenerating his lost limb. Latching onto that idea of regeneration as his sole lifeline, the young man suddenly spots a blue system notification hovering before him. Seeing the system prompt that has appeared, the young man grasps with astonishment that this might be the chance he needs. The system provides details about the fruit of the World Tree, an item capable of healing anything short of death itself. The young man gazes at the vivid red fruit pulsing with ancient power. Weighing the 1% success rate against a 99% chance of dying, the young man asks himself whether the gamble is worth it. With no other option available, the young man decides to roll the dice and brings the fruit to his lips. He seizes this razor-thin chance and bites into the fruit, kicking off the absorption process. The energy inside tears Soo-hyuk apart from within, unleashing monstrous pain. But alongside the hellish strain comes a surge of incredible, overwhelming power. Unable to bear the colossal pressure any longer, the young man feels himself giving way. His eye snaps wide, and through the storm of raging energy, awareness of the outside world filters back in. Waking up in an unknown, featureless gray void, the young man wonders where on earth he is. He grabs his head, and violet arcs of energy begin crackling and spiraling around him. The young warrior vividly recalls eating the fruit of the world tree in his desperate bid to survive. He looks down at his own hands and wonders in horror whether he is actually dead. Then he flinches, slaps himself hard across the face, and is deeply surprised to feel very real, very living pain. Soo-hyuk, thoroughly disoriented, tries to piece together what happened after he blacked out. Through his confusion, the protagonist catches the sound of Nefalano's frantic voice, as if coming from somewhere beyond. Nefalano is gripping his shoulders, calling out to him and demanding to know if he is okay. In a panic, the girl pleads with the young man to snap out of it and stop scaring her. From every direction, ghostly black hands start reaching for the young man, clawing to drag him into the void. The young man teeters on the razor's edge between life and death, feeling the crushing pressure from all sides. While the fruit's absorption continues, he is forced to endure the cold breath of death closing in. He fights desperately to withstand the pull of death until the fruit finishes integrating into his body. The darkness tightens around him, and countless black hands stretch toward him from every angle. He knows full well that the odds of successfully absorbing the heavenly fruit are a miserable 1%. And he understands there is only one path to grab hold of that sliver of hope. A blue glow flares around the young man's body as he activates the Divine Unity technique. He makes the firm decision to release his entire internal chi reserve without holding anything back. Dark tentacles claw relentlessly toward the hero's body, trying to pull him down into the abyss. Soo-hyuk clenches his jaw and mentally repeats that he just needs to hold on a little bit longer. The young man's eyes blaze with blinding blue light, reflecting the enormous strain and sheer force of will coursing through him. Memories from his past life flash before the young man's eyes. The 15 years spent on the brutal continent of Hwan raced through his mind in a single heartbeat. On that continent, he mastered martial arts that even the greatest masters could never reach. Growing stronger with every passing day, he picked up new techniques at staggering speed. Still, Soo-hyuk was aware he had not achieved total perfection in every area. He remembers how the bald monk used to crack him over the head with full force. In that world, where only the strongest had any right to survive, the young man fought relentlessly for his own existence. To stay alive in those years, he was willing to do absolutely anything. Endless sparring sessions, savage battles, and bloody wars forged the young man's will into something unbreakable. Back in those distant days, the young man challenged anyone and everyone who dared to stand in his path, without a moment's hesitation. After years upon years of grinding work and hardship, the hero finally stood at the summit. But that brief taste of grand triumph faded from the young man almost instantly. A thought suddenly struck him that flipped his entire worldview upside down. Soo-hyuk asked himself what actually remains after conquering an entire continent. Wounded and soaked in blood, Soo-hyuk stood in the soft drizzle, staring into nothingness. The understanding of what the true peak of martial arts really means washed over the young man in that painful moment. Even bearing the mighty title of military emperor, he felt hollow. No grand title in the world could lift the crushing weight of loneliness from the young man's shoulders. Everything the young man had achieved felt completely meaningless, thanks to the emptiness gnawing at him from within. He stood utterly alone and hollowed out, despite all his incredible power. Right then, Soo-hyuk began to feel, with piercing clarity, how much he missed his family. Covered in blood, he looked out at the world with eyes full of hopelessness. He desperately wanted to use all his hard-won power to shield the people he loved. Clenching his right hand into a tight fist, Soo-hyuk swore to protect those dear to him with everything he had. After years packed with danger and hardship, the young man survived and made it back home. His eyes shine with a fierce blue light, and a formidable force begins gathering around his body. With blazing determination, the young man declares that he absolutely cannot die in this place. Soo-hyuk's cry rings out through the void, and blue energy explodes outward in a torrent. With an unstoppable will, he tells himself that survival is not optional. It is guaranteed. He tells himself he will never give up, no matter what stands in his way. According to the system notification that materializes before him, the fruit containing 2,000 years of power has started to assimilate. The colossal overflow of energy forces a raw scream from the young man's lungs, and his eyes ignite like beacons. The system officially confirms that the heavenly fruit has been fully absorbed. The readout shows a staggering jump in internal energy, from 5 all the way to 25 gepya. Noticing the changes swirling around Soo-hyuk, Nephilano anxiously shouts his name. Then, flooded with immense relief, she exclaims that the young man has finally snapped out of his long blackout. Leaning over him, the girl demands to know whether he has any idea how worried she was. Meeting his ally's frightened gaze, the young man quietly apologizes for putting her through all that. He asks how long he was out. He stares at his own palms in disbelief, realizing that his recent injuries and all the pain have vanished completely. Noticing with overwhelming joy that his missing arm is right back where it belongs, the young man lets out an audible gasp. His eyes go wide when it sinks in that despite the insane odds, he pulled through, and his arm is restored. With tremendous relief, Nephilano says he managed to stay in one piece after all, and admits that she genuinely believed the young man might have died. Then Soo-hyuk silently wraps the girl in a hug, and the gesture speaks volumes about his immense gratitude. Closing his eyes, Soo-hyuk quietly thanks his loyal companion for standing by him, openly admitting how grateful he is that she was there through all of it. A faint blush colors the girl's cheeks, and tears of genuine happiness well up in the corners of her eyes. But she immediately shoves him back, reminding him that this is absolutely not the moment to let their guard down. The battle is still raging, and the tree needs defending. The flustered girl admits that, in her overwhelming relief, she momentarily forgot they are still in mortal danger. In the distance stands the towering white world tree, and at its base lurks a dark figure. Turning his attention to the last remaining enemy, Soo-hyuk promises that he will personally reach Leviathan soon enough. The scene changes. The green clearing is littered with debris, and the air still trembles from the residual shockwaves of the vicious fight. It is now painfully obvious that the elves' frontline defense has been completely annihilated in the forward approaches. The golden-haired elf Serenial states calmly that the last wall is all they have left. A barrier surrounded by a magical aura marks the absolute final line of defense. The demon remarks with frank surprise that his 100,000-strong army was halted with unexpected ease. The enormous serpentine body of the demoness Leviathan towers above the forest, blotting out the entire sky. Smirking, she stands ready to throw a 1,000,000-strong army into the fray, while the demon, wearing a broad, satisfied smile, extends a hand forward to signal the next phase. The blue-skinned demoness waves her hand imperiously, issuing a command to her numberless hordes. At her signal, entire flocks of black skeletal dragons launch into the air with a deafening flap of wings. Pointing at the fortifications, the demoness gives the order to attack. The mention of a demon legion lands like a death sentence. Their mission is to annihilate everything, World Tree included. Spotting the approaching black tide, the elves cry out in alarm that the enemy is coming again. The commander urges her soldiers to hold the line, despite being outnumbered 10-1. She shouts that retreat means the certain destruction of Elvenheim. From a bird's-eye view, the panic shuffling and chaos within the elven defense ranks is clearly visible. Out of the thick red fog lumber massive, snarling, red demonic beasts armed with fangs. Serenial suddenly shouts about the urgent need to call in the dwarves for backup. A small yellow dwarf pops into view against the sky, looking tiny and almost comically out of place. A violent underground tremor sends chunks of rock flying skyward. while black-horned monsters tear furiously across the sand, building speed. The ground shakes from the tremendous collision, and every demonic hound is pinned flat to the earth. The elven commander's face hardens with grim resolve in the face of the approaching danger. A sharp order to fire rings out, and a torrent of arrows descends on the advancing enemy. The white branches of the World Tree end up at the center of a whirlwind of arrows and flying projectiles. Metal arrowheads begin sinking into the flesh of the charging demons. Drawing his bowstring taut, an elf archer takes careful aim. His face beneath the helmet perfectly calm and zeroed in. An arrow with white fletching springs from the bowstring and sails into the mass of towering demons, punching straight into the center of a demon's eye. The huge red-eyed demon roars in pain as the well-placed arrow buries itself in its eye socket. The monster's heavy bolt crashes to the ground with a flat thud, kicking up a cloud of dust. But this does nothing to slow the advance. The demons simply trample their fallen comrade's carcass and keep pushing forward. The exhausted warriors notice, with rising panic, that the enemy swarm is endless and their numbers show no sign of thinning. A desperate question echoes among the elves. How do you stop a wave that never ends, when the mass of dark demonic shapes has already slammed against the bright wall? Serenial notes with bitter frustration that her spirit magic is powerless against a horde this large, as the enemy's overwhelming numbers are steadily burying the defenders at the wall. The wounded elf in armor grits his teeth, knowing they cannot hold this position much longer. The fighter desperately shouts to Serenial that they can no longer contain the onslaught, but she refuses to give ground. Drenched in blood, the elf commands her warriors to fight to the death for every meter of wall. She flinches and cries out in pain, however, when sharp spikes pierce her left arm. Bleeding heavily, she firmly voices her refusal to fall back, despite her severe wound and rapidly fading strength. The golden-haired warrior understands that if this defense crumbles, the World Tree is finished. And at that exact moment, a demon's gaping maw looms over the wounded elf. But out of nowhere, a bolt of red energy streaks past Serenial and obliterates the demon in front of her. A blinding flash of light illuminates the battlefield, and the elf stares ahead in stunned silence. Nefelano has arrived on the scene. Soaring through the air and spraying destruction, she cuts down the demons that have scaled the wall. A sharp aerial turn ends in a smooth landing, and the white-haired girl apologizes for showing up a little late. Serenial recognizes Soo-hyuk with amazement, his aura completely transformed. The young man calmly tells her to leave everything to him and step back. Soo-hyuk's gaze locks onto the colossal, serpentine demon Leviathan. He states with full confidence that once she falls, this bloody battle reaches its final curtain. Serenial looks at the young man with visible doubt, unable to see how he can bring down such a monster alone. The elf exclaims in astonishment, noticing how drastically Soo-hyuk's appearance and strength have changed. Serenial can barely believe this is the same person standing before her. The young man assures her there is nothing to worry about. He will handle this formidable opponent personally. Asking the warriors to hold just a bit longer, Soo-hyuk readies himself for an immediate charge at the demoness. And the instant the young man rockets into the air, Serenial is left momentarily speechless. Overjoyed beneath her composure, the elf still tries to call the young man back, gripped by deep anxiety. Meanwhile, the serpent-bodied demoness grumbles in irritation that this conquest is dragging on far too long. Crossing her arms, Leviathan asks with dripping irony whether she really has to get personally involved yet again. But then her jaw-like eyes snap wide in surprise as she detects the approaching threat in the sky. Sensing a powerful killing intent, Leviathan reacts instantly, reading the danger, and the strike whistles past her. Standing before Leviathan in his new form, Soo-hyuk radiates dominance. Clenching his fist, he makes it crystal clear that her old bag of tricks no longer works on him. Leviathan's gaping maw twists with genuine shock as she registers the changes. The demoness stares at the young man in disbelief, remembering that Velfagor tore his left arm clean off. Raising his hand with a slight smirk, the young man shows off his fully restored limb, leaving Leviathan bewildered by both his appearance and his power. The young man's calm composure forces the demoness to admit that he is no ordinary human and that he is dangerous, because he has gotten under her skin. In answer to the challenge, a lethal, malicious smirk spreads across Leviathan's face. The demoness declares with undisguised interest that he has proven to be a most entertaining opponent. Fixing the young man with an intense stare, Leviathan addresses him as human. With a smirk, she adds that taking down Beelzebub and Velphagor is not enough. She operates on an entirely different level. Soo-hyuk smirks right back, replying that every one of her predecessors said the exact same thing. Closing the distance, he declares with icy resolve that he will destroy her. Leviathan's shrill, hysterical laughter tears through the forest as she processes his brazen promise, then lunges forward. Opening with a tail strike, Leviathan remarks that she appreciates the confidence, but warns against underestimating her. The demoness cautions that his previous fighting methods might have worked on the others, but they are useless against her, and she unleashes a barrage of attacks on the protagonist. A devastating red beam of energy slams into the ground, scattering rocks and dust. Dodging the blast, our guy wonders to himself whether the enemy is just testing his limits. Complete calm settles over Soo-hyuk's face, and he observes that this level of power is clearly not enough. That calm, however, proves short-lived. In the very next instant, the serpent's tail snags him by the leg. Hovering directly above the protagonist, Leviathan reminds him of her uniqueness with a subtle smirk, and she immediately seizes him and smashes him into the ground, triggering an explosion and leaving a red beam seared in her wake. The demoness's enormous serpent tail whips back up into the sky, leaving a blurred trail behind it. Leviathan sneers contemptuously, dismissing the young man as a petty rodent. Scanning the pile of rubble, the demoness admits with annoyance that he has slipped away yet again. Searching for her opponent, Leviathan loudly demands that the human show himself. Red beams crash into the ground around her, blasting craters into the soil. After yet another volley of blows, the demoness furiously asks whether this is truly all her opponent can do. From the fog that has suddenly thickened comes the young man's calm voice, pointing out that the demoness seems fond of talking to herself. Soo-hyuk observes that from an outside perspective, it might actually look like it is the young man toying with her. He adds with dry sarcasm that a slap from an ordinary earthworm probably would have stung more. Soo-hyuk's foot lifts from the broken ground with a heavy thud, and he coils for a charge. The young man surges forward and promises the demon that she is about to see real power. Soo-hyuk clenches his fist, wreathed in blue energy, and announces he will show her what an actual attack looks like. Leviathan bares her teeth viciously and readily accepts the challenge, declaring that this arrangement suits her just fine. Noting her aggressive response, the young man remarks with satisfaction that this is exactly the outcome he was angling for. Leviathan's expression warps into a malicious snarl, and she furiously flashes her razor-sharp fangs. The young man drops low, swiftly slipping beneath the incoming tail strike. Soo-hyuk dodges nimbly and comments with a smirk that the demoness's moves are far too predictable. Seizing the initiative, he gathers energy into his fist and drives a sharp, piercing blow toward the demon. Striking and releasing the energy forward, the young man casually remarks that he could have dodged that thrust with his eyes shut. The blue strike connects with the serpent tail, and a section of it snaps off with a loud crunch, flying apart. The demoness rockets high into the air, and, to Soo-hyuk's surprise, splits her body into separate parts. Touching down, Leviathan defiantly asks the young man what he thinks of that little trick. She smirks triumphantly, extends blade-like protrusions from her hands, and asks whether the young man saw that particular maneuver coming. Watching her move, the young man understands that she deliberately threw a clumsy attack to bait him into a trap. The demoness, for her part, lunges forward and playfully tells the protagonist not to get discouraged over a setback. Flipping through the air, Leviathan tries to abruptly shift the angle of her attack. Her red energy collides head-on with the young man's blue glow. At the center of this energy maelstrom, Soo-hyuk keeps moving, threading through the thrusts. Realizing with rising irritation that the young man keeps slipping away at the last possible second, Leviathan is genuinely taken aback. The demoness demands to know how a human is capable of moving like that. Soo-hyuk answers her question with nothing more than a calm, confident gaze radiating pure focus. Pausing, the young man steadies himself for the decisive strike. His clenched fist erupts with bright blue flame, concentrating its force before the blow. With a smile, Soo-hyuk asks if this is the full extent of the demoness's power. At that same instant, the blue energy surrounding him detonates, generating crushing pressure. A devastating blow crashes into the green surface, instantly ripping a deep crater into the earth. Soo-hyuk's foot comes down with a thunderous crack on the fractured ground, and he declares that he has no time for a prolonged slugfest with an opponent like Leviathan. Summoning every ounce of his will, Soo-hyuk vows that this fight ends right here and now. Brilliant blue light radiates from the young man's entire body. Leviathan, seeing that determination, clenches her jaw and tries to spit a curse, but her voice dies in her throat. The demoness roars in fury and charges forward, calling the young man a worthless nobody and a lowly creature. Soo-hyuk's eyes close, and pure blue light floods through his whole being, signaling the battle's approaching end. Leviathan screams in rage, pouring all her red energy toward the young man's annihilation. The young man speaks the name of his technique, the third form of the art of the military emperor, and opens his blazing eyes. His hand morphs into the Cloud Dragon hand technique, marshalling all its might for the strike. An immense blue wave of energy crashes over the demoness, swallowing her completely in a lethal glow. He immediately clenches his fist to lock his opponent in place. In an instant, the brilliant blue energy of the hand seizes the serpentine demoness's body with a deafening crack, crushing it with overwhelming force. The young man's tightly clenched fist, encased in dark armor, locks in the killing blow at the moment of impact. Racked by unbearable agony, Leviathan releases a blood-curdling scream as her massive body is compressed into pulp. Stern, immovable determination settles across Soo-hyuk's face. He is seeing this through to the absolute end. And while Leviathan screams from the unbearable pain of her organs being crushed, the young man declares that it is over. Then, in the final moment, he clenches the energy fist completely, and where the demon stood, only a bloody smear remains. A system window announces the destruction of a fourth-rank great demon. Easing up after the fight, Soo-hyuk remarks quietly that even great demons meet a pitiful end. In profile, the young man's calm face gazes off into the distance at the dying embers. Only the faintest trace of surprise touches Soo-hyuk. It is all finally done. A close-up of the young man's face, however, reveals that nothing is over just yet. With fierce battle cries, armored elven warriors throw themselves back into combat against the advancing creatures. Soo-hyuk peers into the distance with a puzzled look, wondering why the enemies still have not pulled back. The young man freezes in confusion. The lesser demons did not disappear after their leader's death. By every rule, the entire horde should have dissolved along with Leviathan. Soo-hyuk's expression turns troubled, and he lifts his gaze to the sky with growing alarm, searching for an explanation. The young man snaps his head upward, and bewilderment spreads across his face at what he sees. Suddenly, from the dead center of the sky, a massive cluster of searing red energy plummets downward. Against a backdrop of roaring flames, a towering demonic silhouette with horns materializes from the crimson light. A booming voice declares that since the three great demons have failed, their lord has come in person. The great demon with white hair, horns, and a halo stands with arms folded, bathed in a bloody aura. The system blares an urgent alert. Lucifer has arrived, the #1 demon. Staring at the leader of all demons right in front of him, the young man utters his name in complete shock, unable to believe his eyes. Lucifer regards the young man with cold detachment, reminding him that he dared to halt his army. Soo-hyuk feels an inconceivable pressure radiating from the sheer presence of this ultimate enemy. The demon remarks with biting sarcasm that a young man in a mere human body somehow managed to destroy great demons. Lucifer's expression is stone-cold serious, and he asks the young man who he truly is. Crushed by the irresistible force, Soo-hyuk realizes he cannot move a muscle. His feet sink into the broken ground under the monstrous pressure. Standing before him is the greatest demon of them all. Looking at the paralyzed young man, Lucifer observes that he has frozen in terror and likens him to an insignificant insect. In Lucifer's outstretched palms, dense red energy begins gathering and pulsing with lethal intent. With an ice-cold smirk, the demon warns that the young man will pay dearly for stopping his army. Hovering with spread wings and a halo, Lucifer radiates an absolutely crushing, overwhelming might.